Detective Comics 1090, the first issue of Tom Taylor, was surprisingly good. I was like, hey, this is much better than I expected. It's not overly preachy. The art from Michael Yates is pretty good, but now we've got Detective Comics 1091. And unfortunately, the comic book has devolved into what I expected to happen in the last issue. And it basically took all the weight and cool factor that was in Detective Comics before and removed it in one fell swoop. And of course, we do have Doc here to talk about this, the guy that's been warning everybody about Tom Taylor for about 10 years.
I remember we had the conversation a couple of times about whether or not DC's editorial was keeping him in check much better than Marvel's. And that's why he seemed to perform better at DC. And maybe he just likes the characters over there. But at the end of the day, I've always thought that just Tom Taylor fucking sucks.
I'll talk about the good thing first. And this is really surprising to me. Michael Yannon is a talented illustrator. But for the most part in the past, I have not appreciated his comic art. I don't like his visual storytelling. It felt very clean. There almost was no personality whatsoever to the art. He's changed his style, and it looks pretty fucking badass now.
I don't have much experience with Michael Yannon. As an artist, I remember like maybe one issue with him and Tom King. So he didn't leave a major impression on me one way or the other. That being said, perfectly acceptable storytelling with really good composition.
The action's a whole lot of fun. There's a little personality to it. Not everything looks like it was put through an AI filter or created by an AI itself, which is kind of what his art looked like previous to this. Now, it's still very clean, but there's a little something to it. And I think the color artist actually did a really good job making a lot of the scenes pop, especially the action scenes. Michael Yaden, I think, has kind of turned the corner. Is he a superstar? I don't think so, but he's certainly somebody that's not going to turn me off of a comic book just by being on there, because I like what he's doing here.
You know what? Now that you mention it, I do remember how much 3D modeled his stuff looked before. And I did not get that same kind of vibe and feel from this that I remember having the last time. Thanks for kind of reminding me who Michael Yannon was. The art was perfectly serviceable, and there was a number of times where I thought it was actually really good. And I really liked the way he portrayed Penguin. It felt like Penguin, and it felt less like a 3D model that I would have expected somebody to use to illustrate the Penguin.
The first issue introduces like the serial killer and this really interesting tie-ins to Joe Chill and Bruce Wayne's past, and obviously the murder of his parents, which I think is very, very cliche, but it was at least somewhat engaging. We throw all that out the window because we need to have a conversation between Batman and Superman about white privilege. Somebody needs to do an intervention with Tom Taylor and sit him down and say, listen, I understand that you don't like what people that you've never met in your entire life have done because they were already dead 100 years before you were born, did in the past, but it's okay to be white, Tom Taylor. There's nothing wrong with it. It's not a sin to be white. You have nothing to be ashamed of, because he's pushing it on to Batman here. And Superman having the white privilege conversation is something that I never wanted my entire lifetime.
This was obviously very Tom Taylor. But in my opinion, this was probably the least offensive Tom Taylor, white privilege, self-flagellating, make the reader feel guilty for merely existing. This is the least offensive of that, because I have an expectation to get that in virtually everything I read. It's not
mustard and bigotry.
No, it's not. It's not that bad. I have an expectation anytime I pick up a Tom Taylor comic that there's going to be at least 2 or 3 pages that I might as well fucking skip because it's just the pages where he lectures me. The fact that I only had 2 and that they were merely eye-rolling instead of me wanting to punt my fucking laptop across the room, which is my normal reaction to Tom Taylor, left me kind of like, wasn't that bad. But this is, again, my soft bigotry of low expectations for Tom Taylor. I have an expectation that he is going to try to beat me over the head with his moral lecturing. If he feels so bad about being white, maybe he should just do something about it himself. In fact, he should go out and find somebody that is the lowest point on the privilege and the diversity stack, the progressive stack that he can find, write his comics for them, give them the credit on the page, and give them the paycheck while he does the work. That's how he can atone for being white, while he leaves the rest of us the fuck alone.
It's the same thing that happened in Superman Son of Kal-El. The second issue, you had a conversation like this, and it only got worse over time. There's also a really weird thing where they introduced this character that Bruce Wayne's mom and dad had saved, and he's helped her out, and now she's become this genius scientist, has the key to curing age and making you young forever. And he has access to it, and that's why he feels so white and privileged, because he's getting something that most people wouldn't. And it's supposed to be this big deal that, you know, he's got a partially torn MCL and he's feeling his age. The exact same story that Mariko Tamaki just told in Batman. And he's very conflicted about whether or not he takes the drugs. Of course, we did get Batman Venom, where he had no problems doing all this kind of stuff. And it's a rehash and regurgitation of the same storyline over and over again. And I almost felt like I did when I was watching that stupid movie In Times. It feels like something stupid like that. I hated it.
I don't care, because I didn't read 1090. So I'm going into this issue pretty blind, other than the fact that it was Tom Taylor. So I had a level of expectation.
Yeah, so we got that conflict that's been going through, and I guess it's really eating at him, whether or not he should do it. Eventually, he does decide to take the miracle drugs that are going to make him young again. Of course, he did create a machine that would rebirth his body. So it's not like this is uncharted territory for fucking Batman. But we're making a statement here because we got to get the message in there. There's another weird thing. Like the very beginning of 1090, there's a kid, he goes in to rob a store and he ends up shooting somebody. And when Batman arrives, he like hits him. Well, yeah, he just fucking shot somebody. And for some reason, Bruce is just overly conflicted about this. Like, I can't believe I hit a kid. No. You were disarming a fucking attempted murder. Unfortunately, I don't think the guy ended up dying, but he keeps having like this weird dream where that kid ends up being Robin and he hits him again after he kills Joker and he feels bad. It's like, this is fucking Batman. Yes, he realizes that the kid is young, but he also realizes the kid is a fucking criminal. This wouldn't bother him that much.
Slapping around a teenager, especially a teenage hoodlum, is something that Bruce has done on more occasions than I can fucking count. He doesn't seem to have any problem about beating the shit out of anybody in the process of doing crime and throwing them in traction to give them a little bit of a wake-up call of, hey, is this shit worth it? But apparently a single slap, it was weak. He ain't the fucking Hulk. Slapping around a teenager ain't gonna damn near kill the kid. At the most, it's gonna leave him a sore jaw for a day. But instead,
well, unfortunately for the kid, he did escape. Batman couldn't keep up with him because he's getting old.
Yeah,
and he ended up in the sewers, and somebody killed him. That's how they've gotten into this investigation, where they have all these juvenile delinquents that have, once they've gotten out of juvie, have ended up dying, and that's how he kind of traces it back, I believe, to Oswald Cobblepot.
Well, sort of. At least this last kid, he had gotten kidnapped, and he recognizes these goons work for this guy, and so he knows exactly where he's going and why. Now, he thinks it might be Penguin that killed the other kids. Is it connected? Is it not connected? No, it turns out it's not.
You mentioned the Iceberg Lounge. Batman, during the investigation, does show up there. After he's taken his treatment, he's had the clear and the cream. He's on the Barry Bonds fucking steroid cycle. We're going to see the cow getting bigger and bigger over the next few months as his head grows. He realizes that he's got a little pep in his step. That meniscus don't hurt so much anymore because he literally was in awe of Damian earlier. Like, man, I remember when I was younger and I could fuck people up, as if Batman has been fucking up people over the years. But he does get back in the saddle and feeling right as rain again. But once again, the action's good. He does beat the fuck out of him, which is fun.
Let's be honest. Batman was always kind of treated as, yes, he's a man. He's just a regular guy. And he'd make comments about not feeling that great or being a little beat up. But for the most part, the minute you got into the actual story, all that shit went out the window anyway. The only reason that they're spending time talking about how much Bruce is beat up from the years of wear and tear on his body is because they got a plot right now that makes him young. They could do something really cool with this, where Bruce figures out a way to give this magical treatment to everybody out there. And then 20 years from now, he's dealing with wild overpopulation and overcrowding and scant resources because people are living 3 times as fucking long, but they're still reproducing at the same rate.
Man, I did not realize that you were such an anti like population guy.
No, I'm
I
not.
feel like you're putting your fucking flag. You're like, fuck this.
No.
The world's overpopulated. And I love it.
I am not an overpopulation guy. I'm saying that you can do that as a story. What are the consequences, both the positive and the negative, of people living 3 and 4 times
That's why you can't let the
longer?
poor live long, Doc. That's why it's only got to be the rich people.
Well, and that's the logic that Tom Taylor even
making
went
the point.
I guess if the rich live longer, they'd actually have a stake in making sure the planet is
dumb fucking line.
Well, I mean, 3 issues from now, all the Gotham elite out there.
Yeah, with some size, like no more pores, no more life for pores.
Exactly.
Let's reduce it back to normal. We gave them longer life, and they're still doing drugs. Fuck these guys.
Yep, it just makes it harder for them to OD now. Here's the thing. I didn't mind the actual detective portions of this, like Batman was investigating. No,
if he would stick to the detective stuff like he did in the first issue, it would be pretty fucking good. The art's good. That stuff is engaging, but the mass majority of the story is dedicated to white privilege and Bruce trying to not age or whatever. Yes, and moralizing and preaching to everybody. It's not as bad as Chip Zdarsky's Batman. It's certainly not as bad as Ram V's Detective Comics, but it's certainly not as good as the first issue of Detective. And I'll give it like a 2.5 out of 5, a 5 out of 10. It's not a passing grade. Let's put it that way. And I don't recommend it.
It was one of the better superhero universe things that I've read by Tom Taylor. It was the least preachy that I've read by him. The lecture was he probably only ramped the power up to maybe 20 to 30% on it. He was a little restrained, so I will give him some points for that. I will go with, 2 out of 5. I didn't hate this comic. The story was mostly okay. If it wasn't for the fact that it was Tom Taylor and there was an actual creative person writing this book, I'd say, they could do something interesting with the long-term ramifications of this plot, or Bruce feeling shitty that he's not able to give this magic treatment to the people because he realizes X, Y, and Z thing. I don't mind this book really at all. Like when you assign it as worst,
more than a 2 out of 5 or 4 out of 10.
It was about what
feels like this is an 8 out of 10 of 4 out of 5.
No. Just by virtue of the fact that there is you're going to tell me what to think, not tell me to think. The minute they start preaching at me and not just posing a moral quandary that they don't entirely answer for me and tell me I'm a bad person if I think otherwise, the minute they do that, the best they're getting is 2.5 out of 5.
I would say West Coast Avengers was the worst book than this. It was a better candidate for it. But who the fuck cares about West Coast Avengers and Jerry Duck?
Nobody.
That was the problem.
Nobody cares about West Coast Avengers. Honestly, the West Coast Avengers don't care about the West Coast Avengers. We did get Iron Man wearing a bike helmet in that on top of his Iron Man costume, because the Iron Man helmet does not actually prevent against head trauma. But no, this was all right. I mean, it was very mediocre, but they lectured us. So fuck you, Tom Taylor. And that he also lost a 1/2 of a star because his name is Tom Taylor. And I know that no matter how interesting of a premise he might come up with, he will find a way to fuck it up. And he could have done a lot more detective work in this. But the detective work portion was perfectly good. I liked it.
There you go. Doc throwing roses at the feet of Tom Taylor, telling him he did a fantastic job. If you like the fully unedited version of this review, because Doc was very rambly today, you're going to have to go to Think Critical Patreon. There's a link in the video description. It's up right now, along with our conversation about heroes fighting heroes yesterday, obviously on the YouTube. Hope to see you there on Doc Unfiltered in the not too distant future.